Rome is going to be relying a lot of them. So over here we are going to have Alaric, and Alaric was one of these foederati people. He was the leader of one of these foederati, and he was the leader of the Goths. So actually Theodosius, that was this last emperor that hold the complete title of Roman Emperor of both sides, the one that your book would say that was smaller than the empire, that the empire had grown beyond the emperor. That emperor was Theodosius, and Theodosius actually had a lot of troubles because there was another emperor that was trying to declare himself as emperor. He wasn't quite an emperor, but he was trying to say that he was the emperor. So Theodosius had to defeat this emperor that was trying to undertake Rome, and that was trying to take the power out of the hands of Theodosius. And remember, as I was telling you, by this time Rome relied heavily on the military power of the foederati. The central army was not strong enough by this time to face a civil war like this anymore. It wasn't the time of Julius Caesar in which the army was able to fight these battles within Rome itself and have all these civil wars. No, that times had ended. So what Theodosius did is that he asked for help from the Goths. He asked for help from the foederati, and Alaric was the one that led the Goths in order to help Theodosius to recover the whole power of the empire. So he fought for Theodosius, and the problem, and I have to be really clear here, and I really want you to think on this, because I do believe that the real problem of Rome was that they were racist as hell. They were really racists. So they only believed that they were Romans, and the only one that were people were themselves. So all these foederati were considered to be barbarians. Where we were talking about the barbarians invading Rome, well, they were already a part of Rome. They already lived in Rome. But of course, as Romans were so racist, they considered them as being barbarians. Even if they were living in the territory, they were fighting their battles, they considered them to be less than Romans. So when finally Alaric helped Theodosius to defeat this other guy that was trying to call himself an emperor, well, the Goths didn't receive the proper compensation for their services and rose against Rome, because they were really angry that most of the deaths were on their side. Most of the soldiers that died were Goths, were from these foederati people, and the least deaths were from the Roman army, and that was intended, that was intentional, because through doing that, then they could really weaken these foederati. They could really weaken these tribes that were the Goths. So as they didn't receive a proper compensation for their services, and they lost a lot of lives, then they were really unhappy, and they chose Alaric to be their leader, and they rose against Rome, and they began this huge amount of wars towards Rome. So everything begins over here. If you remember, let's go back to the beginning of the slides. No, over here. If you remember, over here we have Constantinople, that is the center of the Eastern Empire. Sorry. So the first thing that Alaric tries to do is he tries to fight against Constantinople, but he is unable. We're going to see that Constantinople is the perfect city to face a siege. They can face war through many years, and you will probably not be able to defeat Constantinople. So he tried, but he was unable to. So he decided to go back to Greece, and he actually had a lot of success in Greece. He actually was able to get a treasury from Greece, and he was not stopped because the Eastern Empire was they were occupied, they were busy fighting Attila, and Attila the Hun There is a legend saying that Attila was such a barbarian, he was such a savage, he was so terrible, and the way that he fought wars was so terrible that there is a legend saying that wherever the horse of Attila would step, then no grass and no plant would grow ever again wherever the horse of Attila would step. That was how terrible they believed that Attila was. And Attila was the leader of a tribal confederacy, the tribal confederacy of the Huns, Ostrogoths, and Alans. He was leading these tribes to fight Constantinople. So the Eastern Empire was really busy fighting in this part of it is called Little Asia or Small Asia, all this part of Syria also over here. All this part, they were fighting this tribal confederacy. So the armies of the Eastern Empire were really busy. So Alaric was able to actually enter Greece and get a lot of treasury from there, and he was more or less happy. But the thing is that remember that Alaric really paid good services to Rome, and he really helped Theodosius to recover his crown just before the time that before the empire was divided, because Theodosius was the last solely emperor of Rome. After him, his two sons. He divided the empire between his two sons. So Alaric really wanted an important place within the Roman Empire because he really gave his services, and his services were really important for the Roman Empire. So after getting some treasury here and feeling that he recovered what he had paid, the services that he had paid to the empire, he was asking the empire to give him some territories over here, to reconsider his feudality contract, and giving him the lands that are around over here, more or less. When we have this part of the arrow, let me use this tool to show you. We're going to use this one. Yes, he was asking these lands over here to live over here. So he was asking for a new foedus, a new contract, and it was refused. They didn't want him living there. So again, as I was telling you, most of the problems that the Romans faced were because they were really racist. If they would consider that Alaric actually paid his services and they would have paid what he deserved, then these issues wouldn't have occurred. But they were really racist, and they weren't going to give the respect that he deserved to a barbarian, even if this barbarian has saved the crown of the emperor. So as these territories were refused, Alaric then went again Rome again. And first he tried to invade these parts of northern Italy. These two attempts failed. Actually, they were the last really good battles for Rome. They were the last battles that Rome actually won against Alaric, and were these two attempts of conquering the northern part of Italy. But by the beginning of the 5th century, by 410 after Christ, then Alaric is actually successful entering Rome. And Rome didn't, the Western Empire actually didn't end. It wasn't dissolved when Alaric was able to enter Rome. But for many historians, that is actually the case, because remember that Rome was about being undefeated. Remember that we started studying Rome with this Latin phrase saying Roma locuta causa finita, and that literally means when Rome has spoken, then the discussion is over. The last word is the word of Rome. No one can discuss with Rome, because Rome is the most powerful empire of history. But if Rome has been defeated and this barbarian was able to enter to the holy city, to the eternal city of Rome, then that is why for many historians that is the end of Rome. Rome will continue throughout the 5th century until other foederati completely finishes with the Western Empire. But for historians, this is the end of Rome, because this is the end of Rome being the absolute power in the Mediterranean and being the most powerful empire of history. It is no longer the most powerful empire if these barbarians are able to enter to its city and to rape its city. So I just want you to think about that. This is history. This is a history about racism, because how can they still be calling them barbarians when they have helped them so much? And of course, Alaric is so angry about that, and he wants revenge about that, because he's being seen as less than a Roman. But he has already saved Rome. He has already saved Theodosius, and he has saved his crown. So and Rome was so ungrateful, and Rome sent the gods to die in order to weaken them, and they didn't help them in the battle, and they reserved their armies, and they just sent the gods to die. And even when the gods won, they didn't give them the respect that they deserve. So I really need you to think about that, because that is going to be happening throughout all the territory. All these foederati are going to rise against Rome because of the same causes. And remember something very important. Remember that they actually aren't trying to destroy Rome. They are trying to become Rome. So there is a legend saying that Alaric actually asked all his followers to call him Alaricus, in a sense that he would sound like a Latin, in a sense that he would sound like a Roman emperor. So remember, they are trying to become the Roman Empire, not to destroy the Roman Empire. They are getting the revenge because they aren't getting the respect that they wanted. They aren't being treated as Romans, and they want to be treated as Romans because they are fighting for the empire, but the empire is being ungrateful towards them. So in here we have the first part of the 5th century. So the 5th century starts in 410. In here it says before Christ, but that is absolutely wrong. It should say after Christ. I am really sorry. This should say after Christ. And this is the beginning of the 5th century, because it is when Rome finally falls, finally is defeated by one of their enemies. So we're going to leave the class over here, and the next class, and that is tomorrow, we're going to see the rest of the foederati fighting against Rome. The rest of the peoples that are Romans are not being fairly considered Romans by the Romans, fighting against the empire, and that finally causing the dissolution of the Eastern Empire of the Western Empire by, if I remember correctly, 476. So the duration of the century would be around 66 years, from 410 to 476, when the Western Empire finally ends.